This research was on the realities of adherence and barriers to Ontario's daily physical activity policy. Here, you'll find an outline of this presentation as well as kind of the flow that my research paper followed. So why physical activity? New research findings continue to highlight the link between physical activity and health among school-aged, that's 5 to 17-year-old, children and youth. These findings both confirm and expand upon the many, many well-known health benefits associated with a physically active lifestyle. For example, improved cardiovascular health, bone density and strength, improved cognitive development and mental health, improved academic achievement, and better overall quality of life. According to ParticipAction's latest report card on Canadian youth in 2020, less than 1 in 5 youth in Canada meet national guidelines for physical activity, sedentary, and sleep behaviors. In fact, only 12% are getting the recommended amount of 60 minutes a day of physical activity. As technology becomes an ever-present part of our world, children are spending an increasing and alarming amount of time in front of screens. On average, kids 5 to 17 are spending 4 hours a weekday on a screen, with that time increasing on weekends. While health and physical education classes, or HPE classes, are part of the Ontario curriculum, it's only allotted 10% of total curricular educational time, meaning teachers and parents can't rely on HPE classes alone for students to reach their guideline movements. In hopes of bridging the gap between the allotted time for HPE classes and recommended PA time by the Government of Canada, the Ontario Ministry of Education introduced the Daily Physical Activity Program in 2005. This government-mandated policy holds that PA is essential for the health, growth, and development of children and youth. And it requires that all elementary schools provide a minimum of 20 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity to their students daily. Teachers are the ones that have become responsible for implementing this program and for placing it into their curriculum. However, research of the current literature demonstrates minimal adherence to the program by educators. In fact, this mandated curriculum expectation is often being forgotten or completely ignored. This research aimed to qualitatively examine the practices, resources, and beliefs that have allowed teachers to be successful in the execution and maintenance of DPA in their classrooms. Its goal was to take a holistic account of the complex problem of DPA adherence in order to better inform personal practices and, possibly, the policy and resources as a whole. This research was conducted using qualitative research methods in order to work within the context of teachers' experiences with DPA and the ways which they have constructed or prioritized physical activity, its meaning, and position in their classrooms. Current literature on the topic of DPA was focused on more of a large-scale survey that was examining DPA adherence and barriers. This research, however, used in-depth interviews in hopes of understanding the more complex aspects and lived experiences of participants and DPA and the various ways which they impact themselves and students directly. Through use of research provided in this course, it was determined that one-to-one interviews were an appropriate data collection tool for the study. It was more convenient to organize, especially given the pandemic and its social restrictions. The semi-structured nature of the interview protocol involved using a clear list of issues to be addressed with specific as well as open-ended questions that allowed for the flexibility necessary to adapt the interview in order to better emphasize and understand the interests of the interviewees. The following criteria was used to select participants. Participants were all elementary school teachers currently working in Ontario. They had to have worked in Ontario as an Ontario certified teacher prior to 2005, which was the year of the program's implementation. They had to have demonstrated some participation in the DPA program by providing DPA to their students at one point since its implementation, and they had to have been from a mix of educational backgrounds. While I originally had 3 participants for this study, one of the interviewees actually pulled prior to analysis part. So I ended up analyzing only 2 participants' research. But here we have Debbie and Scott. So both Debbie and Scott are elementary homeroom teachers at different Catholic district school boards in the GTA. Debbie is a grade 2 teacher at an elementary school teacher of about 900 students. She's been teaching since 2004 and has been at the same school for her entire career. Her educational background was in the sciences. Scott is a grade 6 teacher at a school with approximately 450 students and has worked at 3 different schools in his career. His educational background was in visual arts. The main overarching research question of this study was, how is a sample of elementary teachers able to overcome known barriers to the DPA program in order to provide successful implementation in their classrooms. I used the Quarkus app to help sort and organize the data, and the responses from these participants revealed 3 key themes. The first was that participants in the study recognized that their willingness and efforts to implement DPA in their classrooms stemmed from their own lived experiences. That factors such as personal participation and internal value placed on physical activity and athletics led to their desire to provide DPA to their students. While neither of these participants had formal education in health and physical education, and were from different educational backgrounds themselves, both were still able to describe and reflect on successful implementation they provided to their students. A second theme was the positive experiences and outcomes of DPA observed by participants that ultimately contribute to their willingness and motivation to implement the program. Both participants reported that students are willing and able to participate in physical activity daily. Both interviewees noted expressions of excitement, anticipation, and enthusiasm from their students towards and prior participating in DPA. Reports on observed post-DPA behavior among students found that students were, for the most part, more aware, more eager to learn, and were less likely to have behavioral issues on days where DPA was provided to them. An important finding was the reported belief that students are more likely to want to participate and lead healthy lifestyles if they believe that their teacher genuinely values, believes, and participates in physical activity themselves. The third theme was that participants acknowledged their own shortcomings with the DPA program and were able to offer suggestions for making DPA more accessible and attainable for teachers. Unsurprisingly, the topic of barriers to DPA implementation, such as lack of time and resources, was reported. An interesting additional reported barrier was that administrative support and school values also played a role in DPA implementation. Both of these teachers reported different motivation and abilities to adhere to DPA based on the administrators they had and what values they instilled within the school. 3 of the main suggestions to arise from this participants for improving the DPA program was to have DPA offered as a school-wide initiative. Also, they suggested that having student-led or created activities motivated students more to participate. And thirdly, having shared free online resources that were accessible to teachers was important in making sure the DPA was continued. This study was concurrent with previous research on the topic in that it implies that the reported barriers to DPA, most notably time constraints, are experienced by all teachers, regardless of gender, school board, or experience. However, this research was able to describe ways in which teachers were able to negate the barriers they experienced through the use of recesses and school-wide programs. Like other research on the topic, it was noted that teachers and students report positive attitudes towards physical activity and holistic benefits, but that this does not always determine their ability to provide DPA program in their classroom. Both participants have experienced and observed the benefits of physical activity for their students firsthand, and describe academic, emotional, and physical benefits to DPA similar to those outlined in current research. These lived, positive experiences and observations have served as a motivating factor in continuing implementation in their classrooms. In this study, previous experience and areas of familiarity with the physical activity also helped to inform the types of DPA teachers provide to their students. Finally, this research found that teacher implementation of the program was largely dependent on the values of their school and the support of their administrator. I believe that this research has many future implications for DPA as a whole. For all of the stakeholders involved, I believe that everyone could take something from this research. Teachers, administrators, the Ministry of Education, and anyone wanting to create resources or conduct future research on the topic. And I just want to thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I hope you found it enjoyable, and I hope you take the time to read my research paper. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And don't forget to move today. Thanks.